Greetings. I am Rhonda Turner, the member of the Eastern Area Mental Health Committee, and we are delighted to have you join us for this evening event featuring our phenomenal panelists. I bring greetings to the leaders of the organizations sponsoring tonight's event and our special guests. Eastern Area Director, the Links Incorporated, Dr. Shuana Tucker-Sims. Jack and Jill of America, Eastern Regional Director, Melinda Alexis Hayes, Esquire, also a member of the Links Incorporated. Eastern Area Mental Health Chair, Cicely Horsham-Brathwaite. Eastern Area Program Coordinator, Anna Maria Bishop Harris. Eastern Area Program Coordinator, Nia Kina Douglas Glenn. Eastern Area Human Services Chair, Siobhan Arlene Bradley. Eastern Area Human Services Co-Chair, Jill Bussey Harris. Eastern Area Mental Health Committee members, Pia Alexander Harris, Nikki Faria, Leslie Hayes, Rhonda Turner, and Gretchen Vaughn. National officers, appointed executive council members, all members of the Links Incorporated, all members of the Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, other guests. It is my pleasure to welcome the Eastern Area Director of the Links Incorporated, Dr. Shuana Tucker-Sims, to bring greetings.
Thank you, Rhonda, for that introduction. A special thanks to the Health and Human Services Facet, Mental Health Chair, Cicely Brathwaite, and her committee for planning this Green Table Talk, and to you for joining us. Good evening. It is my privilege to greet you on behalf of the officers, leadership team, and over 4,500 members of the Eastern Area of the Links Incorporated. This is the latest in the Eastern Area's Green Table Talk series, started in the fall of 2019, of conversations with influencers and experts on timely topics we need to talk about, pay attention to, and take action on. Tonight's discussion, Don't Pay the Price, Learning to Work and Live Well in 2021, fits that description to a T. Important to spotlight and worthy of attention and action. When we think about wellness, the discussion usually focuses on physical well-being. This was especially true in 2020 as the global pandemic ravaged communities of color and spotlighted the existing inequities in overall health and management of chronic health conditions. Now, as we push to get our communities vaccinated, it is imperative that we now turn our attention to mental wellness. Though mental and physical well-being are interrelated, mental illness is often stigmatized and as a result, much less talked about. But the negative impact of untreated or ignored conditions can be just as devastating as ignoring physical illness. We decided to have this discussion during this month because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It is imperative that as a community, we pay much more attention to this aspect of our lives. There is absolutely no shame in seeking help when needed from a qualified, specifically trained professional. We can no longer afford to turn a blind eye to the state of our minds. If you broke your arm, you would seek immediate medical attention. We must learn to treat our mental health with the same sense of urgency. Don't pay the price by ignoring mental hygiene. It's just as important as physical hygiene. This topic also needs to resonate with Black women who tend to take care of and do for everyone except themselves. Self-care is critical, and as I am fond of saying, you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. There is a reason why the emergency instructions in an airplane always include putting your oxygen mask on first, then helping others. We are in for a great discussion, and I hope you leave the discussion better informed and more inspired to take action. We are happy to partner with Jack and Jill of America Incorporated's Eastern Region to do this important work, and we thank you for being here. Please join me in welcoming the Eastern Regional Director of Jack and Jill of America, and my friend, Melinda Alexis Hayes.
Thank you so much, my beautiful sister, Dr. Shuana Tucker-Sims. It has been a beautiful and wonderful partnership between Jack and Jill of America Incorporated and the Eastern area of the Links, of which I'm a member of both. This past year has definitely been difficult for, I would have to say, all of us. We are working on new norms, things that we have never been through in our lives. And as we are emerging out of social distancing, there are still steps that we need to take to make sure that we are available, not only for ourselves, but for our families, because you cannot pour from an empty vessel. This has been one of my pillars that I've started as the Eastern Regional Director, is focusing on our mental health. In Jack and Jill of America Incorporated Eastern Region, we have 59 chapters, and all 59 chapters have been charged with making sure that we silence the shame regarding how mental illness is affected and is looked at in our community. So we are very important, it is very important to all of us that we make sure that we participate in such activities to make sure that all are engaged. We've held webinars in which we are hearing from our children, from our teens, from mothers and fathers that we need the support. Therefore, if they need the support, we will always, always be there for them. And thank you so much for everyone who has joined tonight. Please take the information that you learn, share it with your family and friends. That's how we become stronger and healthier as a community. And we must lean on one another. You heard the list of all of our fantastic panelists tonight. I definitely want to have to shout out one of our panelists, who is my Brooklyn chapter link sister, Dr. Leslie Hayes. But not only that is she a personal friend, but she is also the medical doctor to my daughters. So, you know, it's just a showing that we all rely upon one another. And this is a circle, this is a family unit of support. So if you ever need anything, please just reach out to one of us. And again, to my dear, dear, sweet friend, Shuana, thank you for the partnership. While we are friends, working together has just been an absolute joy. So thank you so much for this invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Shuana Tucker-Sims, and thank you, Melinda Alexis Hayes, Esquire, for those beautiful, heartfelt greetings. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator, Cicely Horsham-Brathwaite, Chair of the Eastern Area Mental Health Committee.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to have you with us this evening. I'd like to introduce our outstanding panelists. I'm going to give you highlights from their bios so that we can jump into the conversation that promises to be engaging and invigorating. First, I'd like to welcome Enola Aird, JD, founder and president of the Community Healing Network. Enola is a lawyer, activist, mother, and founder and president of Community Healing Network. Launched in 2006, CHN is the only organization focused exclusively on addressing the root cause of devaluing of Black lives in the United States and around the world, the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. Under Aird's leadership, CHN has put into place key elements to build a global grassroots movement for the emotional emancipation of Black people, including Defy the Lie and Embrace the Truth pledge campaign, Community Healing, Wear Sky Blue Days, Rapid Response Ubuntu Healing Circles, Emotional Emancipation Circles with the Association of Black Psychologists, the Valuing Black Lives Global Emotional Emancipation Summit. Aird was born in the Republic of Panama and is of Caribbean heritage. She is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Barnard College and earned her JD from Yale Law School. She's also a former corporate lawyer and has worked at the Children's Defense Fund and is the past chair of the Connecticut Commission on Children. Welcome. We're delighted to have you here this evening. I now would like to welcome Linda Goler Blount, MPH, President and CEO of the Black Women's Health Imperative. Linda joined the Black Women's Health Imperative as the President and Chief Executive Officer in 2014. And in this role, she has overseen more than $20 million invested in Black women's health and research. She's responsible for moving the organization forward in its mission to achieve health equity and reproductive justice for Black women. Before joining the Imperative, Linda served as the Vice President of Programmatic Impact for the United Way of Greater Atlanta, where she led the effort to eliminate inequalities in health, income, education, and housing through place and population-based work. With more than 25 years of experience in the public, for-profit, and nonprofit sectors, Linda has a distinguished career that includes successful tenure at the Coca-Cola Company, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as an expert scientist. She previously served on the Emory University Center for Ethics Advisory Board. A Michigan native, Linda holds a Master's of Public Health degree in epidemiology from the University of Michigan and a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering Operations Research from Eastern Michigan University. Welcome this evening, Linda.
Thank you.
I now welcome Linda Orbe-Austin, PhD, founding partner of Dynamic Transitions Psychological Consulting. Lisa earned her doctorate in counseling psychology from Columbia University. Her views about career advancement, job transitions, leadership and diversity inclusion are regularly sought by the media, and she has appeared in outlets such as the New York Times, NBC News, Forbes, the Huffington Post, Refinery 29, Business Insider, and Insight into Diversity. She has been honored as a top voice on LinkedIn in the area of job search and careers. Dr. Orbe-Austin has been an invited speaker at various national conferences, and she recently gave a TEDx talk entitled The Imposter Syndrome Paradox. She regularly consults with organizations in the private sector, nonprofits, and educational institutions in supporting their employees and senior leadership teams to address gender bias, diversity, equity and inclusion, leadership development, effective communication, and conflict management. Her book, Own Your Greatness, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, Beat Self-Doubt and Succeed in Life, co-authored with her partner, Dr. Richard Orbe-Austin, was released in April 2020, and the book is a finalist for the Forward Indies Book Award. Thank you and welcome. I want to tell you all who are in attendance this evening that this is a dream team of leaders who have perspectives about well-being from a physical, emotional perspective that is going to be so important. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about how this conversation came about. Recently at the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated conference, we had a conversation, a workshop where we addressed many pertinent issues facing African-American women. And one of the issues that came up, and something that the Mental Health Committee of the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated has been talking about, is that our work environments, our medical systems are a source of great harm for Black women. It is these are the places often where the challenges of systemic racism, bias are presented to us. And we thought no better people to come tonight and share this information. So I'd like to start with the first question. And Linda, I'd like to pose this to you. From your vantage point, what are some of the most significant challenges facing Black women in 2021?
Well, that's a big question, Cicely, and thank you for your wonderful introduction, and thank you to the Links and Jack and Jill for allowing us to have this really important conversation today of all days.
Yeah.
To answer the question, I think really simply, stress. We did a study years ago at the Black Women's Health Imperative where we asked Black women what the #1 health issue was and what they were talking about, and it was stress then. And we validated it in a number of ways. Something important to know is that Black women have on average 15% more cortisol in their bloodstreams than white women at any point in time. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and chronically elevated cortisol can lead to all manners of adverse health outcomes. You couple on top of that the PTSD that Black women absolutely are suffering from, given all that happened last year and is continuing to happen. We're trying to process the trauma, we're trying to process the grief of both seeing the murders, but losing loved ones, maybe having been sick ourselves from COVID-19. We're trying to deal with job loss, the loss of income, the loss of health insurance, the loss of our way of life for some of us. And honestly, my biggest concern is that Black women have put off the things that we would normally do, our well woman visits, our breast cancer screenings, our cervical cancer screenings, and our mental health. Many of us know we are feeling stressed out. We feel the depression. If we had depression or anxiety or any underlying mental illness before all of this started, it's still there, but we have put off seeking help. And so my concern is we're going to see our health deteriorate as a population, and that it'll become more and more difficult to get back to where we were because of all of these losses. So I think this conversation is really important to have so that we can help ourselves get back on track.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open it up to Lisa and Enola.
What I'd like to really fully associate myself with what my sister Linda has said about the centrality of stress, but I want to go to the root cause of that stress. We live as Black women in a culture that profoundly devalues our lives. This most significant challenge facing us in 2021 is the same challenge that has been facing us for 600 years. 600 years since the telling of the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. That has set us up and set our ancestors up to come into a world always devalued. Think how amazing we are, that even with the weight of that lie, the power of that lie on our shoulders, the stress that it induces, the challenges that it presents for us, how much we have accomplished. Think now with me, how much more we will be able to accomplish when we take the time to heal from that lie, and more importantly, to really rid ourselves and our children and this world from the lie. That is why we do the work that we do.
Yeah, I would just like to kind of like second what Enola and Linda have said. Like, I agree with everything that they're sharing about what is the most profound impact on Black women. And I think I'll also highlight the fact that, the pandemic has impacted women in general in terms of the workplace, but it has impacted Black women more than any other group, and that we are losing jobs at higher rates, we are struggling at higher rates, and that this pandemic has really highlighted the discrimination in the workplace and the ways that it impacts us even more critically than almost any other group.
Thank you. So I'm hearing the importance of early detection, recognition, and seeking treatment, recognizing what we're really battling against, and recognizing both from a historical approach and a current approach in terms of what this last year has particularly done to Black women in this country, around the world, and in the workplace. Enola, I'd like to start with you to pose my next question. We hear phrases like trust Black women, listen to Black women, support Black women, protect Black women. What policy changes do you recommend that elected officials, corporate and community leaders make so that trusting, listening, supporting, and protecting Black women is actually a reality?
I have a very short list because Community Healing Network is not a policy-focused organization. We're focused on promoting the emotional empowerment of Black people, Black women, men, children at the grassroots level. But for me, the most important policy change would be an unprecedented, and I suppose since so many unprecedented things are happening in this administration, maybe we've got a shot at this, would be an unprecedented level of support for culturally grounded Black community and women-led grassroots initiatives that really center and promote the physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and behavioral health and well-being of Black people, aimed at all Black people, women, men, children. And then in particular, a special emphasis on addressing the multi-generational impact of the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, how that has affected us. I think a focus on that would help us to do a big part of what is in the news these days about reparations. Reparations have to be more than, cash for labor given. It has to be ultimately repair the harm done by the greatest crime against our humanity, which was the telling of this lie that diminished and demeaned us and essentially cast us out of the circle of humanity. So we would want to put the mental health and well-being, physical, et cetera, at the center, because once we have our health, once we've got that repair, I believe in Black people so much, I know there will not be anything that we will not be able to accomplish. And even if others don't do it, we've got to figure out a way to do it for ourselves.
I really appreciate the way that you're tying in that multi-generational impact and historical impact on today. And I'm so curious to hear from Linda and Lisa what you think about what needs to happen so that we are protected and well, what needs to happen structurally, what needs to happen at a personal and community level.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I'm probably fairly pragmatic when it comes to policies. So for example, if we had tied reimbursement, medical care reimbursement, to outcomes by race and ethnicity and gender, we'd see the Black mortality rate plummet. Okay, if we look at something like the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force that wants to raise the age of screening mammography to 50, when more than 25% of our breast cancers occur under the age of 50, and none of the studies that they based their decisions on included a single Black woman. If we looked at data and said, nope, research actually has to include Black women before you make judgments and issue guidelines about their health. If we use data to drive policies, then we would have had COVID-19 testing where Black people actually live, and the vaccine rate would be much higher. So at a practical level, there are certainly things we can do, but Enola has said it beautifully. I mean, this is an issue of political will, which has to address the original lie. And until we do that, we're going to continue to have these kinds of policies that work against our physical health and our mental health.
Yes, no, I'll agree too. That this is really, I think, especially to Linda's point around tying it to compensation. One of the things I have argued for a number of times is to tie, the advancement of Black people in organizations to your compensation. And certain organizations actually do it, and they do it successfully. And there are a lot of organizations who don't want to do it because they don't really want to protect Black women or listen to Black women. Or, I think it's a great thing to say, but show me the money, show me where it's at, show me where you're actually doing it, show me the stats, show me what's really happening. Don't give me the platitude with nothing behind it, and make it impossible to push back on it. And when your comp is tied to it, it becomes really evident whether you can do it or not, or whether or not you're going to actually escalate in the company because you're advocating for these things or not. And so I'm a really big advocate for show me the money. Same thing with ERGs. There are so many ERGs at companies, and for Black women, for people, and they don't fund them. So they're just there to support, create extra labor for the people in the ERGs, and not actually compensate them for their time, give them time away. There's also been a whole bunch of stuff around giving Black women extra leadership opportunities and getting training programs. However, they're buried in work from these training programs and having to do their job in the leadership program after work. It's insane. So in some ways, they're loading us with more work and the idea that they're helping us, but they are actually burying us even further. So if they wanted to do it, they'd show us how to do it, and they would make it so we don't actually have to work harder in order to kind of get seen, get heard, get listened to.
I love these points, and I kind of want to circle back to something that you said and draw this question to the title for tonight's webinar. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So often, individual Black women are struggling silently, trying to get our work done, trying to organize our schedules so that we can get to those doctor's appointments, trying to organize our children's care, our parents' care. People come to us in our workplaces asking us to take on additional assignments, additional work. These issues are systemic, but often they're felt at a very personal level where an individual feels that they're doing something, right? That they are the originator. I didn't ask the doctor the right question. I didn't do the thing. And so I want to ask, and I want to send this question to you first, Lisa. So our title is Don't Pay the Price. What is the price that Black women have been paying, living and working, especially over the last year?
I mean, I think all the prices, right? They've been paying it in their health, you know, and sort of the deterioration of their own health, like we were just talking about earlier, and not being able to see doctors and be able to take care of themselves. But also economically, they're paying the price of being paid less, you know, so they're paying all the prices. I don't know if there is any price they're not paying. And I think it's really important to recognize that there might be other ways besides us always having to pay the price and always having to lift the heaviest loads. I think it's really important to kind of to not do it alone. I mean, I think to rely on some of the principles that come from our heritage around collectivism and community and like leaning into other people to get support, because we cannot do this alone. And this idea of like, you know, stark individualism in a culture that we were dragged here to is not working for us in a lot of ways. And I think we have to really think about how we reconnect to our communities and really rely on them to survive this and to advocate for us and to support us and to lean on. So I think it's really important that we do build community and reconnect to those values that were part of our original history.
I think at the very beginning, we mentioned several times, and rightly so, the question of self-care. But one of the things that we have to relate to, and I really agree with Lisa on this, that we are Ubuntu people. We are people who draw our strength from community. And so in addition to self-care, we need to attend to community care and recognize that we are each other's medicine. We are the answer to our challenges. These organizations represented here are collective organizations who do, in fact, always support each other. The question is, how can we be much more explicit about supporting each other around these very concrete challenges? How can we be more explicit about supporting each other around addressing the lie, on attacking the lie, about finding ways to come together to help heal one another so that we can be strengthened and armored for the challenges that we face outside?
You know, and that notion of Ubuntu doesn't exist in the workplace typically because we're often the only one, you know, particularly at senior levels. And so, you know, Lisa, to your point, we're working. I mean, there's actually a fair amount of research that shows that Black women work about 20% more than white women. And it's, you know, because we feel like we're double, triple, quadruple checking our work because we all know no can come from anywhere in an organization. You know, somebody just has to ask a question and then, you know, but then under this guise of we're helping you, all this other work gets put on us, and we don't say no for fear of being perceived a certain way. And so we end up taking all this work on, and there actually ends up being no benefit, no greater productivity, no greater promotion, no more money, nothing except our health deteriorates. And how many of us listening on this call know a woman in her 40s or 50s that suddenly died from a heart attack or a stroke, seemed perfectly healthy, and now she's gone? We take this on. And it was interesting, the researchers found that if Black women stopped doing that, actually nobody would really even notice, but we feel like we have to. So I love this idea of maybe we can create a community with these organizations across the country that supports women in their roles, so that while they may be the only in their companies, they know they're not the only doing this work.
One of the things that we do in our emotional emancipation circles, which is a self-help support group we've developed, is to really spend time together armoring ourselves and each other for how do we react to those microaggressions when we encounter them? What are the empowering ways that we can respond in ways that leave us stronger and leave them kind of in the dust, in a sense, because we need that sense of empowerment. And that can only be found together. We can do that strategizing and that healing together.
That's right.
I mean, I felt like I had a whew moment when Linda, you said, if we stop doing that, no one would notice. I had a moment. And so I'm so curious to ask, what are some strategies that you would suggest or that you personally use to help yourself or to tell a sister how to not pay that price?
Yeah, one of the things that we say all the time is mind your sister's business. I mean, how many times last year, even this year, did you talk to someone and say, how are you doing? I'm fine. And you knew she wasn't fine. You knew she was just saying that. Get into her business. Really, you're fine? What's fine? What's going on that's fine? Because I'm not fine. If we could really be honest about how we feel and what is actually happening in our lives, we can actually help each other heal. Don't be okay with I'm fine. And what we've seen is, our white colleagues, under the guise of trying to help us, keep asking us how we're feeling because they want us to help them feel better about what's going on. Don't take that on. That's their stuff. Let them have it. We have to focus on ourselves and just realize that we are wonderful, valuable, worthy because we did one thing today. We woke up. That's all that was required. And we don't need anybody else's stuff. We've got enough of our own and we can take care of ourselves.
And I'm going to piggyback onto what Linda said and sort of like challenge each other to work less, like be each other's accountability partners, to cut the time off when at 6 and to be like, no, I'm not volunteering for that committee. And like, no, I'm not going to be your DE&I chair. And like, learning to say no and having accountability partners to say no where you can have them, because I think it's really important so that you don't feel alone. And, we often get told when we're young, like you got to work twice as hard to get half as much. And we have this like in our brains, in our systems. And so it's very hard for us to pull back from these notions, but it's so important for us to really create space for ourselves, create space for the things that matter to us, the things we love, to our self-care. But it requires sometimes, having a community around you who's like, yes, I'm glad you left at 5:30, I'm glad you didn't take that on, because oftentimes we're not getting reinforced for that. We're getting reinforced for the overwork.
That is so true. And it's true not just in the corporate setting, but also in the nonprofit setting where we're so mission driven, passionate about what we're trying to do that, there's no limit to the amount of time that we will devote. And I just want to give a shout out to the chair of my board, the chair of the Board of Community Healing Network, who happens to be a Link sister, who yesterday said to me, you need to confine yourself to 5 days a week. And she was minding my business. She was getting into my business. And I thank you.
And as I hear you, it also occurs to me, as we're minding one another's business, that's also an opportunity to get information about who are the healthcare providers, both physical health, mental health, spiritual well-being, that we turn to for support in order to help ourselves move forward. I think often those referrals are so important to find out who's providing good care, who's providing, who offers cultural competence in terms of their approach. I mean, I want to tell you, I have been on Community Healing Network's website for resources. I have read Lisa's book on imposter syndrome. I am flipping through Essence magazine and downloading every report from the Black Women's Health Imperative to arm myself with information and to pass those resources on. So we'll be sharing a resource list, but if you missed any of that, please check those resources that will arm and empower you with support for how to go forward. I'm going to pose one more question, and then we're going to move to audience questions. So those of you in attendance, I want to invite you to put your questions in the Q&A area. We'll get to as many as we are able to get to, but we do want you to bring those questions forth. And you can also contact the committee with those questions afterwards. So last question for now that I'd like to pose is, there was recently a study from leanin.org that was featured in other magazines that found that women in corporate America noted only 1 in 3 Black women are asked how they're doing by their managers. And nor are they checked on to see how they're balancing the personal and professional. So I think we've talked about many reasons why we think this is and what should be done, but I want to pose this independently and start with you, Lisa, to see if there's any other suggestions that you'd like to offer around this.
I mean, I think that, people aren't checking in on Black women because they don't want to know. I think it's as simple as that. They just don't want to know.
Yes.
And so I think it's also important for us to take the message, right? Like, if you don't want to know how I'm doing, what am I doing here, killing myself here for you? I think it's really important to think about environments and places that want to nurture you and care for you and want to know how you are. Because I think they're gonna burn you out. They're gonna use whatever they can use from you and take it and profit off of it and then move on. But you won't. You will still be left with whatever they've left you with. And so I think it's really important, if they're not checking on you, if you don't feel nurtured, if you don't feel cared for, you really got to look at sort of whether this organization is really meant for you or whether it's built for you, and all those other phrases. But I think it's really important to recognize if people don't check on you, they don't care what you're doing or how you're doing, like it says something about whether or not they really value you. Like I was sitting on a nonprofit board, and there was a younger Black woman, like 20 years younger than me, and she was killing herself on the board, and she was amazing. And I was encouraging her to stop doing so much, and they knew she was burning out, and they were letting her. And she had a whole life to live outside of this board, and she wasn't getting to live it. She was getting married. She was, about to get up for a promotion, but she couldn't spend any time on anything else because they were burying her in DE&I work on this board. And so one of the things I'm most proud of, in this pandemic is helping her get off that board and helping myself get off that board, because they weren't valuing us on that board, they were using us. And so I think it's really important, if people aren't looking for you and they're letting you burn out, it says something about how they want to utilize you. So.
Yeah, I would just sort of paraphrase Lisa and say, no is a complete sentence. Use it early and often. Because they don't want to know. And last year, every Black person became a DEI expert in companies and organizations around the country. And, they wanted us to explain what was going on. And all that did was add more stress to us and actually make our work environment that much more difficult. So, I told some of my colleagues, just tell them that's not my job. I don't, that is a skill set. That's not one I have. I can't help you with that. And just leave it. No is a complete sentence.
I agree with that. I have at the ready, always a reminder.
I mean, that visual aid really brought it home.
Well, it also makes sound.
So if you're watching, get yourself a no button.
It's right next to me.
So I have the distinct privilege of now turning to members of the Mental Health Committee who will bring questions from the audience, and I'm so delighted to have them here to bring these questions to you. We have Gretchen Vaughn and Pia Alexander Harris, and they are aided by Leslie Hayes, who's also a member of the Mental Health Committee, who's been helping us very closely in the chat, and so happy to have that support. Please take it away.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So there is a question. The first question in the chat is, what are ERGs? And I'm thinking that's about employee resource groups and just, I guess, just wondering a little bit more about how that impacts women in the work environment, or all of us in our work environments?
Yeah, so ERGs are employment resource groups, are often known as also affinity groups. They will group people by race or gender or sexual orientation or all kinds of different like groupings. They can be a great place to find other people. If you feel like you're the only one in your department, it can be a great place to find other people, other Black people if you're looking for other Black people. It can also be a great place to find a mentor and other things. But I think the main problem with them is that they are not often like paid experiences, that they often are not well funded. So it can be a great place to find support and connection within your organization, but also like, I think it's really imperative that people advocate for funding for ERGs, so that you can bring in speakers and do things and as a group and not be like just there volunteering more free time. And I think it's also important, I'll just add this piece to watch if the ERGs have senior leaders on them and not just, junior members, because you need senior leaders to be able to advocate for money and things like that. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Greetings, everyone. We have a question that was submitted. It says, I am retired, but working harder than I did when I worked full time. Demands, obligations, and family and service to beloved organizations leaves me stretched beyond the max. How do I balance stellar personal contribution without sacrificing my mental and spiritual health?
Well, if it were me, I'd prioritize, look at what I get the most joy and satisfaction from, and stop doing the rest of it. Sometimes we do a lot of work and actually take on a lot for reasons other than our own satisfaction. Maybe we feel like we need to do this for other people or for other reasons. Really examine why you're working yourself so hard right now, and make sure you're clear on where the joy is coming from and where it isn't. Get rid of that part. Because in the end, I think you'll never regret having taken care of yourself.
And recognize that you are worthy and valuable and worth taking care of. You are fragile as a human being, and you are sacred and deserve to have times when you are not in service to others, but in service to yourself, in service to your spirit. And I recognize that that's very hard to do because we're conditioned, we're programmed to keep going. That's how we get our value. But sometimes we need to recognize that we are enough and we don't have to do, we can just be.
There's another question to the committee that's not in the chat. There's a narrative that's being pushed heavily in particularly conservative media, misrepresenting the meaning of equity or attacking critical race theory in school curriculum. How will this impact us as Black women in the workplace and Black mothers for our children in schools? And how do we push back on these damaging distortions of the truth?
I'm not the right person to ask that question of, because I believe that in response to everything that they decide to do, we simply need to do what we're doing. If we think critical race theory is important, then we need to figure out ways to teach it to ourselves and to our children. Asking them to do for us things for us, I think by now we should realize that that's not what their purpose is. Our purpose must be us. And so when they say no, I'm not surprised. And if we want it done, we have to do it ourselves.
Thank you.
And I think it also raises an issue of kind of this whole DEI world. I mean, when you think about it, this world is, the way it's framed up, it's one group has to do something to or for another group. And so implied in diversity, equity, inclusion is a power imbalance. So that means equity can never be achieved as long as it's one group's responsibility to make another group feel some kind of way. So if they were truly interested in equity, then everybody would feel a sense of fairness. Everybody would feel that equity, but there's still that very patriarchal white supremacist view in the way DEI gets implemented in organizations across the country.
Yeah, and I'll also add that, you know, there's been a recent movement in the D&I movement to move away from actually training, teaching, supporting, developing to a kind of, you know, CYA, you know, kind of like hiring attorneys to protect the entity and the institution from any kind of liability around DE&I. That's what DE&I oftentimes now DE&I heads will now do, is protect the institution. It's not a method to deal with systemic racism. And so I think it's really been co-opted. And so, I mean, I think it's really important, you know, as both Enola and Linda said, is really, you know, to bring it to your children, to bring it to, you know, to kind of really make sure that they are getting educated in the ways that they are. We have 2 little ones, and they know all about critical race theory. They have studied history from all over the world. They know all the kings and queens of Africa. They have gotten the history and the knowledge that they need, that they would never get in an institution, because we have made sure that they get it.
Good for you.
Yes, thank you.
So Lisa, I just want to say one thing, because you raised a really good point with last year, corporate leaders and organizational leaders having made their anti-racism statements and put them on their websites. The concern now is that people will try to hold them accountable to those statements. And so you're right, we are seeing an increase in hiring a different kind of person in that role to figure out how to say, yes, we believe what we said and what we put on our website, but we're not really going to do any of that. And kind of,
but don't sue us because we're protected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's become like an adjudication issue. Like they want to adjudicate the issues as opposed to deal with the systemic issues. It's become a protectorate. They've stopped hiring people who actually would, or many of them have stopped hiring people that actually would make changes or help them to think about that. It's more like a legal protectorate. So I think oftentimes also too in your organizations, if you're looking at your DE&I head and your DE&I head's a lawyer, really think about what the institution is saying about DE&I. I think it's really important because that's what's happened in many places. And so.
So we have another question that was submitted that really speaks to the emotional toll that people are feeling. Good evening. I have friends who are going through tremendous tragedies, losing a child or a spouse. Many mental health professionals are overextended and cannot take on new clients at this time. Do you have advice on how to offer them support or where to direct them to get professional help during these difficult times?
I do think it's hard to find the professional help depending on the nature and the level of severity of the challenges being faced. We recommend really creating our own healing circles. One of the things we offer is a very simple booklet for setting up an Ubuntu healing circle. And it's simply a space where Black people can come together to show each other love, to be a space where we can breathe, where we can get some respite from the outside world. It is not therapy. It is not intended to address deeper needs, but it is intended to address the very pressing need for connectedness that we have, and for love, for self-love. And so that's available on our website, communityhealingnet.org. We have to be as creative as we can, and we have to find every plan B, C, and D that we can develop.
I love that. And I would also add, like, you know, to kind of consider the Association for Black Psychologists. They're very receptive, especially the New York branch is very receptive. They're all like family. We've all grown up with them. And so, you know, to reach out to somebody on there, they'll find, you know, they'll connect you with somebody. I think there's a National Association of Black Social Workers. So to go to the associations and see if you talk to the presidents and see, because it can be very hard where many of us are like overloaded, like just like we're carrying more cases than we've ever carried in our lifetimes because we're trying to see as many people as we can. But I think, to try to do your due diligence and try to find connections throughout, because it's, there's not many of us. In terms of psychologists, there's only 5% of psychologists are Black, and only 2% of them are Black men. So there're just very few of us. And so you just have to, find your communal connection, connect to associations and see if they will find somebody for you. But they also have National Association of Black Psychologists has a directory and website too.
Lisa, you're right. ABSI is wonderful. They have comparable to our Ubuntu Healing Circles. They have Sawubona circles as well. So, and we work very closely with them.
And I would say, Cicely, on our website, if you go to stresstest.bwhi.org, you can take the stress test and get sort of a baseline measure of where you are. It is not diagnostic, but you can get a sense of, just how stressed you are. And then there are resources there, but also the sites that Lisa's talking about to see what kind of help. Maybe it's a life coach. Maybe, if you're pregnant, maybe a doula might help. There are different ways to kind of get support. So I think I just encourage people to take advantage of any opportunity they can to get help. Form your own support circle, form your own sister circle, your own, Black Women's Health Imperative. We did self-care circles back in the 80s and the 90s. Form your own. You don't have to talk to a licensed therapist if you don't have access, if you can't afford that. I understand, but do talk, do have the conversation, do share.
I'd like to add to that too, that sometimes working with your physician to get a direct referral can be useful, because again, often we rely on relationship. And so if someone has a spot and then we get a call from a colleague, that sometimes helps the process, but also not to minimize the usefulness of hotlines if you are in crisis, to have someone to speak to, bibliotherapy, which simply means you read a book that helps to give you some tips for how to be well. And again, these are an adjunct to therapy, or when that is not available, but know that you have options. And for those of you who are members of the Links Incorporated, we have a toolkit that has hyperlinks to resources around the country.
There is a question in the chat, but there's also another Q&A question as well. So I'll go to the one in the chat. What strategy should our organizations represented here use to include self-care when program obligations require some level of excellence as our professional organizations? Anyone want to tackle that one?
Can you
I'm
read
not sure
that?
I fully understand the question.
Can you read it again?
Absolutely. What strategy should our organizations represented here include self-care when our program obligations require some level of excellence as our professional organizations? So I guess it's, how do we find that balance of self-care in terms of also needing to meet the requirements of the program obligations in our respective organizations?
I think
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I'm going to reiterate what Dr. Tucker-Sims said in the intro around the fact that you got to put your mask on first. And so even if you're expected to engage in professional excellence, you can't engage in professional excellence at a continuous and high level. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're just going to burn out. And so I would say, like, the self-care should come first before the ideas around the professional excellence, and it shouldn't come after you do the professional excellence, then you get a little self-care, because otherwise you can't sustain, you can sustain, and eventually it leads to depression, it leads to all kinds of other things that you don't want. So I think it's really important to really prioritize the self-care, even when you have demands around excellence. I think it's especially important.
And I agree. And it's important for us as Black women to know that there's a causal relationship between racism and gender discrimination and obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, all these things. I mean, some researchers have said if we didn't have racism, obesity rates would drop, maybe cut in half. So, I agree with Lisa. We have got to take care of ourselves. First, the community, yes, all the programs are important, but if we're ill, we're just not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to really talk about community resiliency if the organizations aren't resilient, because the people in them are not resilient.
It really goes to how we define success individually and communally. Is it just about the doing and the end results, or is it a more holistic understanding of what it means to be a successful person or organization? Is it an organization that drives people to depression, or is it one that really respects human beings, regards their dignity as a first importance? And that's true at the individual level as well. So we really need to rethink what we think about when we talk about success. A successful person, a successful organization. Is it just about the bottom line, or is it about the whole and the various aspects of the person?
Thank you so much.
And what I'm hearing in that is a call to action to communally set some norms for how we approach our work, how we get that work done, as we are working at our jobs, providing service to our organizations, that we truly are our sister's keeper, and helping one another set effective limits is a great source of support. This has been just an edifying conversation, and I truly thank you on behalf of our committee and our leadership for coming here to share your words with us this evening. We are going to share a resource list. I believe it should come in the chat, where you have information from each of the presenters and the organizations that they represent. And we thought it would be really great to end with a question posed to each of our panelists. And that question is, if you would share with us one thing right now that is bringing you joy, or that you're excited about.
Well, earlier I shared about my grandson. He brings me joy every single second of every day. In this moment, I want to share that I'm really excited about the expansion of the Global Movement for Emotional Emancipation just today, which happens to be Africa Day, as well as the anniversary or the commemoration of the killing of George Floyd. We met via Zoom with women in Europe who are forming an organization to really focus on healing of the diaspora. We met with women in the United Kingdom, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. And we're really reaching out to each other across the diaspora to do what we call making this the decade to embrace the truth of Black humanity, because that is really, after all, what is at stake here. And so that is absolutely exciting to me, and very hopeful, and very, very much believing that this will happen and that we will make this the decade to embrace the truth of Black humanity.
Well, I am trying to practice what I preach. I'm at the beach. I have my tennis rackets, and tomorrow and Thursday and Friday, I'm not checking email.
Enjoy.
I know, I'm along with that. I'm going on vacation in 2 weeks, and I cannot wait. I so need a break. But yes, I'm looking forward to that. And something fun is that I just closed. I'm in the process of closing my second book deal. So I just got offered my second book deal, and it's going to be about organizations and systems and how they affect imposter syndrome and how they perpetuate it. So very relevant to the conversation.
Well, I mean, what a high note to end on. I am taking away from this conversation know our history, lean into community, read the room, the organization that we work in, go to receive our medical services in. And if it does not serve you, begin to think about what other options exist. Seek support from others. Be open to asking for help and receiving help. And take an opportunity to experience joy on a regular basis, as well as engaging in self-care. I mean, thank you to each of our presenters, Ms. Enola Aird, Ms. Linda Goler Blount, and Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin. What a phenomenal evening. We thank you so very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cicely and committee. Thank you, Enola and Lisa. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your wisdom with us this evening.
You're so welcome. It's my
Thank
pleasure.
you very much. It was a lot of fun. Very nice to meet you all. Good night.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.